Hello, everyone. I'm happy to welcome you to our virtual encounters series of events, which we promote online in April, every Wednesday at 8 p.m., sharing stories about jazz through the lens of different arts, film, music, photography, literature, and in this way, we made our Jazz Appreciation Month in Montenegro interesting and connected to the world. We celebrate Jazz Appreciation Month in Montenegro since 2007. Thanks to my official visit to the United States and Smithsonian, a year before, I learned about the Jazz Appreciation Month from the producer Ken Kimmery, and I decided to follow his advice to share Jazz Appreciation Month and its mission to Montenegro. During more than 10 years, we organized hundreds of jazz events, workshops, masterclasses, concert tours and lectures, exhibitions and musical productions, collaborating with many respectable American musicians who contributed to our jam in Montenegro. Today's story about curating American jazz at Smithsonian will tell us a famous American jazz author, writer, pianist, and musicologist, Dr. John Edward Hasse. I would like to remind that Mr. Hasse was our special guest in 2018 for Jazz Appreciation Month in Montenegro, dedicated to theme Women in Jazz. During his two-day visit to Montenegro, Dr. Hasse gave lectures at Ministry of Culture, Why We Need the Arts More Than Ever, and in Podgorica Gymnasium, Ella Fitzgerald, First Lady of Song. He also attended the concert within the Jam Festival, met the Minister of Culture, Secretary of Montenegro National Commission for UNESCO, and other cultural workers, journalists, musicians, and supporters of our jam. We are delighted to share live conversation with Dr. Hasse, who will tell us a story about curating American jazz at Smithsonian. Before Dr. Hasse starts, I would like kindly ask the U.S. Embassy to Montenegro, Vice Consul Michael Murphy, to greet you.
Thank you so much. Dear viewers, thank you for joining us, and a big thanks to American Corner Podgorica and to Jazz Art Association Montenegro for hosting tonight's event, and for your dedicated work on promotion of jazz music in Montenegro. We hope that you will enjoy this presentation as much as we will. The Smithsonian Institution is the world's largest museum, education, and research complex. As a child, I imagined it as a place that holds America's memories. In my many, many trips to the museum, I was endlessly fascinated by its collection and the incredible effort that staff at the museum put into preserving America's treasures. Even now, when I visit Washington, D.C., I never fail to visit at least one of the 19 museums that are managed by the Smithsonian. One of my favorite memories was visiting the Air and Space Museum as a young child, which led to my lifelong fascination with aviation and my career later as a pilot. Tonight, we'll be focused on jazz music, a uniquely American style of music. Hosted by the National Museum of American History, Jazz Appreciation Month has been celebrated each April since 2001. Its purpose is to stimulate and encourage people of all ages to participate in jazz, to study the music, attend concerts, listen to jazz on radio and recordings, read books about jazz, and more. With this, our guest speaker is Dr. John Edward Hasse, Executive Committee Chair Emeritus and Curator Emeritus of American Music at the National Museum of American History. Dr. Hasse earned a Bachelor of Art cum laude from Carleton College, a Master's of Art, and a doctorate from Indiana University, and 2 honorary doctorates. He has received 2 Grammy Award nominations and 2 ASCAP Dean's Taylor Awards for excellence in writing on music, and has been named a legend of jazz education. Active in cultural diplomacy for the State Department, he has lectured on leadership, the arts, and music in 25 countries on 6 continents. Dr. Hasse's books include Beyond Category, The Life and Genius of Duke Ellington, Discover Jazz, and Jazz, Smithsonian Anthology. He is a contributor to the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and 8 encyclopedias. I am proud to call jazz a uniquely American form of art. From its New Orleans roots in the American South, jazz has grown into a worldwide phenomenon. Today, there are jazz lovers in every corner of the globe, all of whom find a common language in their love for this music. Thank you again for participating in the celebration of jazz music. Please join us at the U.S. Embassy in Podgorica in welcoming Dr. Hasse. Sir.
Dr. Hasse, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Michael Murphy, and want to thank Maya Popovich and Anita Buinovich for this the invitation to join you today. And I have to have a deep bow to Maya Popovich, who has been doing so much for jazz, participating in Jazz Appreciation Month for 15 years, and really setting an example for other countries around the world how to acknowledge and celebrate jazz. Thank you, Michael, for that introduction to the Smithsonian. If you put all the Smithsonian's resources together in music, you would have an amazing treasure. Let's listen to this.
Hi, and welcome to Smithsonian Music. I'm David Scorton, and it's my privilege to serve as the secretary of the Smithsonian Institution. I'm an amateur musician and once had the honor of playing with the Smithsonian Jazz Masterworks Orchestra. And who knows, perhaps someday they'll invite me back. Time will tell. In the meantime, I invite you to enter and explore all we have to offer in music here. If you put all the knowledgeable and talented music staff, collections, and programs together, the Smithsonian would be the world's largest museum of music. Our experts bring to life countless musical treasures, works of art, documents, and more than 15,000 instruments that tell the story of music from Appalachia to Zambia, from bebop to hip hop, from Bach to the Beatles. It's all here, and we have ambitious plans to expand all we do. So enjoy your time at this site, come back often to visit us, and let us know what you like. Now, back to practicing.
Now, David Scorton is the last secretary of the Smithsonian. Our current secretary is Lonnie G. Bunch III, who formerly directed the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which opened 5 years ago on the National Mall and is a source of great pride for most Americans. Now, you might expect that this museum would have treasures of jazz, and they do. Most notably, Charlie Parker's saxophone and the papers of Cab Calloway. There is also jazz, there are jazz recordings that have been issued by Smithsonian Folkways Recordings, the Smithsonian's record label. Here are just a few: Mary Lou Williams, James P. Johnson, New Orleans Jazz Fest, and New Orleans Jazz. Most of what the Smithsonian has and does in jazz, though, is at the National Museum of American History, where I worked for 33 years. And this is our current director, Dr. Anthea Hartig. Now, we here in the United States hear the word curator or curating an awful lot, curating a film series, curating a playlist. But to me, a curator is one who is in charge of selecting, arranging, and presenting material for an art exhibition or museum. Curating paintings, you might imagine, is conceptually could be as easy as hanging pictures on the wall. But how do you curate music, which after all is ephemeral? Well, the curatorial responsibilities for a curator of music at the museum where I worked are fivefold: build the collections, conduct research, do exhibitions and other kinds of public education, do public and museum service, and fundraising. Now, some of these are similar to the work of an American professor, where both have to do research, both have to do education or teaching, and both do service. But the biggest difference is that for a curator, you also have to build the collections and work with them. That's the fundamental difference. The professor may do fundraising as well, but we have to build and take care of the collections. The collections are the core of everything that a curator does and everything that the museum has. Begin with the collections. Why do we collect? To preserve the past and to create opportunities to learn. How do we collect? Well, just about everything the Smithsonian has comes by donation from a generous spirited citizen. The Smithsonian gets almost zero money from the American Congress to buy collections. So just about everything comes by donation. What do we collect? We collect material culture, archival materials, music scores, photographs, correspondence, itineraries, publicity, scrapbooks, artifacts, musical instruments, artwork, costume and clothing, and awards, and we collect oral history. I'll be giving you examples of all of these during this presentation. The first item of jazz that I collected was Dizzy Gillespie's, quote, bent trumpet. I wrote him a letter asking him if he would consider donating his last trumpet to the collection. I didn't hear anything. 3 months went by and I was getting curious about would we ever get a response? And a colleague said, write his wife, Lorraine. So I sent essentially the same letter to Lorraine Gillespie, and 4 days later, a great big box arrived. She had packed up his trumpet and sent it to us. I think she wanted it out of the house. But Dizzy came to the museum and we had an exciting day. There were 10 or 12 television crews, and there you see Dizzy in the bottom corner taking this trumpet out of the case, and that's a young curator, younger than I am now, beside him. This is how the trumpet looks. The case is emblazed with his stencil. And another great prize for the collection, two of them actually, come from John Coltrane. We have his Selmer Mark VI saxophone that he was one of three principal saxophones he owned. He played on this very late in life. This is John Coltrane's handwritten manuscript for A Love Supreme, another one of our most valued artifacts. Now, the biggest collection we have in terms of jazz is Duke Ellington's archives and memorabilia. There are 100,000 pages of unpublished music, another 100,000 pages of other documents, 1,000 photos, and 500 artifacts. It is a national treasure because Ellington, in my view, was the greatest all-around American musician, composer, bandleader, conductor, orchestrator, arranger, soloist, accompanist, and musical thinker. The collection came to the museum via his son, Mercer Ellington, whom you see here, bringing the collection to the Smithsonian. It has, as you would expect, published sheet music, lots of photographs, medals and other awards. Here's the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian award, given to Ellington by President Nixon on the occasion of Ellington's 70th anniversary at the White House. Personnel and salary records, band itineraries, more photographs, posters from around the world. This is from Heidelberg, not too many years after the close of World War II, and lots of music, 100,000 pages of unpublished music. Here's East St. Louis Totalo, Take the A Train, Harlem Air Shaft, Mood Indigo. And here you see how he personalized the music for the individuals who made up his band. He wasn't writing for first trumpet, second trumpet, or third trumpet, but for the individual voices of the members in his orchestra. Ray for Ray Nance, the trumpeter. Butter, nicknamed for Quentin Jackson, trombonist. Jimmy Hamilton, the clarinetist, and Rab, short for Rabbit, Johnny Hodges. This is one of the secrets of Ellington's genius. He personalized his music to an incredible extent. This is how it looks on the shelf at the museum. And the collection has drawn musicians from all over the world, scholars, journalists, etc. Here are Rufus, Reid, and the late Jimmy Heath, looking at Ellington manuscripts. Ahmet Erdogan, originally from Turkey, who was the son of Turkey's second ambassador to the United States, came to Washington as a teenager, went jazz crazy, and later co-founded Atlantic Records. He came back about 2004 to the museum to Washington and was studying Ellington music. Here's Esperanza Spalding, the young bassist, composer, and vocalist, to tell you how excited she was to come and hold these manuscripts.
So one exciting thing this last year has been the opportunity to go into the archives at the Smithsonian and get to touch and smell and look at these original scores of some of the legends of our culture, not just the music I like, but our culture really, Duke Ellington and John Coltrane. And there is a connection between history, you know, experiencing the realness in the moment of something that's 60, 70 years old, and the continuation of that knowledge on to the next generation. So when I think about music education and our history and cultural identity, I know they're all connected.
Louis Armstrong, the single most influential American musician ever, and he was taught to play cornet at the Colored Waifs Home, a juvenile detention center in New Orleans that he was sent to after a cop found him shooting off a blank pistol on New Year's Eve. And there he was taught by Peter Davis, we believe, on this battered cornet, which is now part of the museum's collections. Herbie Hancock came to the museum and donated a number of keyboards to the collection, including this memory Moog synthesizer and this Yamaha that he would strap around his neck and walk across the stage playing for a number of years. Benny Goodman's daughters came and donated his clarinet and music stand. Artie Shaw donated 2 clarinets, including the one he made, played on the famous Begin the Begin recording. Here he is late in his life after donating the clarinets and getting a medal from the Smithsonian to thank him. The great drummer Buddy Rich, his daughter Kathy donated his drum set to the museum. And in 1988, I got a chance to meet Ella Fitzgerald when she came to the museum. It was one of the most exciting moments of my life to meet the First Lady of Song. And some years later, about 8 years later, her collection came to the museum. It's an enormous collection, 50 cubic feet. There's all sorts of material, photos, scripts, correspondence, film, audio, etc. Includes this red suit and the leopard skin coat that you see in the picture by Annie Leibovitz. Tony Bennett donated this portrait of Ella Fitzgerald. He's a very fine painter. He signs his painting Antonio Benedetto. That's his real name. The Frank Schiffman Apollo Theater Collection. Apollo was the famous theater in Harlem that, starting in the mid-30s, became the leading theater for Black audiences anywhere in America. And we have a wonderful collection from there. After World War II, the owner kept a booking card on every musician who played there for a week. And here's his card on Ella Fitzgerald starting in 1946. You can see that in 1951, he said she registered very well. In 1953, excellent performance, very disappointing business, actually a substantial loss. These cards are a wonderful source of information. Scholars come from all over to use them. Gene Krupa, here you see him with the Benny Goodman Band. We have his bass drum. And this is Thelonious Monk Jr., who came and donated his father's skull cap. Lionel Hampton came and donated his vibraphone. Esperanza came and donated the gown she wore at the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony when she performed for Barack Obama. Miles Davis's children came and donated some music for Porgy and Bess. Miles Davis plays Porgy and Bess. And this jacket by Versace that he wore at the last public appearance of his life at the Montreux, Switzerland Jazz Festival. Lester Young, one of the greatest of all saxophonists, known for, well, here's his saxophone that came to us just about a year ago. And it happened because Lester Young Jr., oh, this is Lester Young's famous pork pie hat. His son donated that. There you see him in the middle. That's Lester Young Jr. And on your right, that's my colleague, Theo Gonzalez, curator. What happened was I wrote an article on Lester Young Sr. for the Wall Street Journal, and Lester Young Jr. saw it and contacted me and said, he thanked me for making a tribute to his father and his judgment getting it right. And so I asked him, do you have anything of your father's? He said, well, yes, we have saxophone and a hat and some things. So it came to the museum and we're thrilled. This is Leroy Neiman in the middle, one of America's most popular painters. He's no longer with us, but his foundation donated this giant painting called Big Band. It's his imaginary big band of all time. And this is proudly displayed on the first floor of the American History Museum. Herman Leonard, one of the great jazz photographers ever, donated 135 of his images to the collection. There you see Dizzy Gillespie and Billie Holiday. William Claxton, that's Thelonious Monk, donated 25 of his photos. And the Duncan Sheet collection is an amazing collection of 12,000 photographs. That's Billy Strayhorn. Randy Weston came and donated the royal robe and hat that the King of Morocco presented to him. Chuck Mangione came and donated his signature hat. Clarinetist Paquito de Rivera came and donated the music that he had composed, his clarinet. And Chico O'Farrell's family came and donated compositions of his, including the Afro-Cuban Jazz Suite. That's not Ray Brown, but that is Mrs. Ray Brown. And she came and donated her husband's bass. And Ron Carter donated his church bass, which is a bass between a cello and a bass in size. The Benny Carter collection is a large collection of 87 cubic feet. He was a great saxophonist, trumpeter, and especially composer and band leader who helped break the color line in Hollywood and thereby paved the way for people like Quincy Jones. Jimmy Lunsford led one of the great swing bands of the 30s. We have over 300 of his orchestrations. Fletcher Henderson was one of the first great band leaders in the 1920s. We have 60 boxes of material. James Moody, I just love James Moody. He was a wonderful man and a terrific saxophonist, a composer, a flautist, and we have 14 cubic feet of his material, as well as saxophone and clarinet. Here is Ken Kimmery, whom Maya mentioned earlier. He runs the jazz programs. He directs the jazz programs at the Museum of American History, including the Smithsonian Jazz Oral History Program, which is a remarkable program with over 300 lengthy oral histories. There you see Cab Calloway on the left, Quincy Jones on the right. Here is Anthony Brown interviewing Chico Hamilton. And here is trombonist Curtis Fuller telling our interviewer, the late Bill Brower, who just passed away 2 days ago. I'm so sad about it. Telling him about a few lessons he learned from Lester Young.
What did you get from Prez in that regard in your time with him?
How to be a performer, what it meant to be a performer, how to play, what to play, when to play it, when not to play, when not to use unnecessary phrases that are unwarranted. And I'm guilty of it now sometimes.
I'm guilty of that now sometimes. Just one tiny little sample of the hundreds of hours of oral history tapes and the information and wisdom they contain. You know, I've talked about a number of acquisitions that we managed to bring into the museum. Sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. An example of that came when I was courting B.B. King. Here he is on his band bus, and he seemed really interested in donating one of his former guitars or some other material. But then he asked me to talk to his manager, and his manager just didn't get it. He wanted to give us a mass-produced tour jacket that B.B. King had never even worn. It was just something you bought at a B.B. King concert. He didn't get it, and we never, unfortunately, got anything from the king of the blues, Mr. B.B. King. Now, a second area of responsibility after the collections for any of the curators is doing research. And in my case, that took the form of some books, a book on ragtime, 3 CD set on the music of Hoagie Carmichael. I was one of the principals behind a 6 CD set called Jazz, the Smithsonian Anthology. It has a 200-page book, and it's over 8 hours of music, 111 selections. It's kind of a history of jazz in a box. And a jazz textbook called Discover Jazz, and chapters in books on David Baker, who was a mentor, books on the Apollo Theater and jazz in Europe. Now, what do we do with collections? Well, among many things, we support research by staff. And in my case, that was a biography of Duke Ellington and a box set of recordings called Beyond Category. But more importantly, we enable research by others. As I mentioned, scholars, students, journalists, broadcasters come from around the world to use our collections. And here are just a few of the books on Duke Ellington and Billy Strayhorn that have been heavily researched in our collections at the museum. Well, what do we do with collections? We also develop exhibitions for the general public. Here is a large exhibition. It was 5,000 square feet, Beyond Category, the musical genius of Duke Ellington, that toured for about 8 years all across the United States. Here is a scene from New York City in the 1920s, the Cotton Club and the Lafayette Theater. Here is this famous Savoy Ballroom in Harlem, and section on Ellington's travels. Here is the section on Ellington's compositions, the sacred music. There you see an interview with Wynton Marsalis on the screen. And then we boiled it down to a smaller version, and this was circulated around the country by the American Library Association. It went to 45 cities, and here are some staff at the Public Library, Paducah, Kentucky, setting it up. You see, it's 60 panels of text, graphics, and photos, and that was a big success. And then the US State Department took that exhibit and boiled it down even further into a set of posters, which they could produce multiple copies of, and they circulated all around the world. Here it is on display at the University of Cape Town in Cape Town, South Africa. I don't know if, Michael, if it's still available, but it was really fun helping your colleagues at the State Department put this together.
It sounds amazing.
They also, State Department also did one on Louis Armstrong that went all around the world. I saw it in Mauritius, and there may have been one or two others. I think the Jazz Age in Paris was another one. We also did an exhibit on jazz composers, comparing and contrasting the work of Duke Ellington with his right-hand arranging and composing partner, as he called him, Billy Strayhorn, who wrote the piece that became the Ellington Band's theme song, Take the A Train. Many people think Duke Ellington wrote it. Duke Ellington recorded it, but Billy Strayhorn wrote it. And it was a thrill of mine to curate an exhibition on Ray Charles, who was dubbed the genius. And here you see some of his stage costumes, his keyboard, which was encoded with Braille labels, not for the keys themselves, for the various sound effects. And some of his recordings, his Braille edition of Reader's Digest, and yes, his Braille edition of Playboy. He really did read it for the articles. Ella Fitzgerald, her centennial was several years ago, 2017, and we put on an exhibit on her. And here it is. Here we are at the grand opening. We're literally cutting the ribbon, and that is Ken Kimmery way on the right. And you see third from the left is, and fifth from the left are the heads of the Ella Fitzgerald Charitable Foundation. And here you see a view of the exhibition. There's a video there right in the middle. We have sheet music, recordings, Keys to City. Way to your right is the Kennedy Center honor, and some of her Grammys. Another view, and there's that red suit designed by Don Loper. And way to your right, a line drawing of her by Pablo Picasso. And here is that Annie Leibovitz photo. That's also in the collection now. The foundation, the estate of Ella Fitzgerald said, you can have just about anything you want. So we got the red suit, we got the leopard skin coat, we got the hat, we got the glasses. We didn't get the convertible. If you'd like to see the exhibition online, here is the here's the URL. Earlier, I showed you a huge painting by Leroy Neiman. His foundation supported the creation of the Leroy Neiman Jazz Cafe. And in this wall, you see portraits of jazz musicians by Herman Leonard, the first four, and the last one, that's Charlie Parker, Art Blakey, Billie Holiday, and Dizzy Gillespie. And the fourth one is by Ray Charles by William Claxton. And on this wall are some of the posters from Jazz Appreciation Month, from left to right: Tito Puente, Frank Sinatra, Benny Goodman, Billy Strayhorn, Benny Carter, Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, Artie Shaw, and Duke Ellington. I think, Maya, some of these are familiar to you.
Yes, I have many of them, but I just would like to ask about the project. How did you create the posters of Jam?
Well,
What was the idea?
the very first poster was with Dizzy Gillespie, and we contacted the Grammy Foundation, and we had a wonderful image in our collection of Dizzy Gillespie, and they had an idea to make the poster tall and narrow, and they actually paid for the first and the design for the first poster. So after that, we standardized on that shape.
Yeah, we made a copy a few years ago, and we also made an exhibition Jam in the Smithsonian with your posters. It was wonderful.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for all you've done and what you do. And so another responsibility, I guess you could say, that I took on was what you might call a living exhibition. And that's, how do you make the archives sing? Well, I thought, we have all this music of Duke Ellington. We need an ensemble to play his music as he composed it. So we managed to found a resident big band, the Smithsonian Jazz Masterworks Orchestra. And this orchestra is now celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. That on your far left is David Baker. There you see him on your left. He and Gunther Schuller, whom you see on the right, were initially the co-musical directors, the musical co-directors rather. And then after a couple of seasons, everybody felt it would be a better idea to have a single musical director. And so David Baker became our sole musical director and was just absolutely brilliant at it. Here we are at the Kennedy Center performing a guest concert with James Moody, saxophone. That's David Baker conducting on the right. And here we are in Giza, Egypt, just outside of Cairo in 2008, performing a concert. David Baker, and we brought with us a couple of dancers from the West Coast to dance with some of the music, to point out the historical connection between jazz and dance. Jazz originally was a music for dancing. And here we are with guest artists, the late Clark Terry and the late Joe Wilder. And here's a long shot of the concert at the Pyramids and Sphinx of Giza. This was another one of the great exciting days of my life to worked with Ken Kimmery to make this concert happen. And here's just a short video. Currently, our maestro is Charlie Young. You see him there on the right. He's a chair of the saxophone department as well at Howard University in Washington. On Duke Ellington's actual centennial, April 29th, 1999, we went into Washington National Cathedral and did a thrilling concert of the best of his sacred music with the Morgan State University Choir. This was another just thrilling day. And these are some of the program booklets that we've put out over the years. I say we, I don't work at the museum anymore, but I still feel very loyal to it. And here are 3 of the CDs of the Smithsonian Jazz Masterworks Orchestra. And here is Ken Kimmery, who is also the percussionist of the Jazz Orchestra, and he runs that, the Jazz Orchestra, the Oral History Program, Jazz Appreciation Month. He's Mr. Jazz at the National Museum of American History. Tom Williams on the right, and James King Jr. on the left. So I mentioned earlier that we are expected to do service, and it's under that banner, I guess you could say, that I developed the idea of Jazz Appreciation Month. This was in the late 1990s. I felt jazz wasn't appreciated enough in its home country and needed more public understanding and appreciation of it. So we established April as Jazz Appreciation Month, JAM for short. And as Maya knows so well, every year we put out a poster. Here's Dizzy Gillespie, Billie Holiday, Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, Benny Goodman, Frank Sinatra, John Coltrane, Lionel Hampton, Billy Strayhorn, and Dave Brubeck. These are just some of the posters, and they're sent around the world and around the country. Branford Marsalis came in 2002 to help us unveil that battered cornet of Louis Armstrong that I showed you earlier. Paquito de Rivera came to help us celebrate. And we've produced a series of 72 radio public service announcements. And here is the voice of Wynton Marsalis.
How y'all doing? This is Wynton Marsalis, urging you to please support Jazz Appreciation Month. We're going to try to make Jazz Appreciation Month into Jazz Appreciation Decade.
Jazz, born in America and enjoyed worldwide. For more information, visit www.smithsonianjazz.org.
Here's Carlos Santana.
Hi, this is Carlos Santana. Did you know that April is Jazz Appreciation Month? I've been inspired by great musicians such as Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Herbie Hancock, and Wayne Shorter. Let jazz inspire you. Check out a jazz club. Read a book. Buy a CD. Take a child to hear a jazz concert. Jazz, born in America, enjoyed worldwide. For further information, visit smithsonianjazz.org.
And if you'd like to hear all the rest of those radio announcements, or see all of the posters, or get information on how you can participate in Jazz Appreciation Month, please do visit the website that Carlos Santana just mentioned, smithsonianjazz.org. This is now celebrated in all 50 states and at least 40 countries around the world. Here's a logo from Jazz Jam, rather, in Philadelphia. Here's Dallas, Texas, D-Jam, they call it. Here's San Diego. And here's a national celebration in Armenia and Durban, South Africa, April, Jazz Appreciation Month. You see the poster says, the banner. And in Montenegro, because of the hard work, incredibly hard work of Maya, I understand that in Montenegro, Jam is the largest jazz activity of the year. Is that right, Maya?
Yes, it is.
And
All
with
months events.
Here's from 2018, just some of the events. And I know that the American Corner and the American Embassy have been very good supporters and partners of yours. Here are some of the other partners that Smithsonian works with Jazz Appreciation Month, including the National Association for Music Education. Now, you might ask, what are the rewards of curating, of doing this work? Well, you could say that effectively the Smithsonian is the world's largest classroom, because 30 million people visit the Smithsonian, not during the pandemic, but when it's open. 30 million people walk through the doors of the Smithsonian every year, and over 100 million visit its websites. And then still more millions read its magazine or watch its television network. So when you put something on view at the Smithsonian, it might be seen by millions of people. And if it stays up for a long time, in museum parlance, a permanent exhibition is one that's up for 20 years. And over 20 years, truly millions and millions of people will see an exhibition. That's why, in a way, it's the world's largest classroom. I felt very rewarded in helping to shape how the public perceives and values American music, especially our jazz. And it felt like making a long-term difference, because we like to say we are in the forever business. Now, what do I mean by the forever business? Well, when we bring in Dizzy Gillespie's trumpet or Duke Ellington's archives or something like that, we don't just bring it in for 2 weeks or borrow it for 6 months or a year. We bring it in permanently. It's a responsibility to take care of each and every artifact. You have to catalog it. You have to house it in a safe area with climate control and all security. And so we don't take anything in that we don't intend to keep forever, in perpetuity. So we are in the forever business, and forever is a long, long time. So it's a big responsibility to decide how you shape the collection, because that will shape how the material is viewed and utilized, not just by the Smithsonian, but by others long into the future. So probably the toughest issue or the most challenging consideration that I had in my 33 years was, what do you collect to represent the past? And how soon do you know if it's going to be really important historically? David Baker always talked about wanting 20 years to get some psychic and historical distance from something to decide if it's really important. And do you pick something that was a hit last week, or do you wait some years to see if this is really going to stand the test of time? So, and then another challenge was, because there's not that many staff to do any one thing, and there are just a few people who work with jazz. If you're doing this, it means there's nobody else that's going to do that, because you got to choose between this and that. And if you're doing this, you're not going to have the time to do that necessarily. So there are opportunity costs and lost opportunity costs. And I found that I was constantly debating with myself, now, what's the most important thing I could do next? Is it to work on Jazz Appreciation Month? Is it to try to bring in another collection? What is it to try to raise some money from private sources? So those are some of the issues. And if you'd like more information about music in general at Smithsonian, I invite you to visit music.si.edu. If you want more information about jazz, Smithsonian Jazz, it's smithsonianjazz.org. And if you're curious to see some of my other writings, please, I welcome you to visit my website, johnedwardhasse.com. And now we have a little time left, so I'd like to open the floor to any kind of questions people would have.
Alexa?
Dr. Hasse, if you don't mind, I'll take the first question.
Please.
I know this might not be fair, but do you have a favorite part of your collection, something that is just so special to you?
Well, it would be the Duke Ellington collection as a whole. It's the largest Ellington-related collection in the world, and that collection that I showed you pictures of attracted 15 or 20 more Ellington collections. So now we have the papers of several of his musicians, Rex Stewart, Kath Anderson, his own sister, Ruth Ellington's collection came there. And so it's, if anybody's doing research on Ellington or any of the key musicians in his band, they have to come and use this collection. But if you ask me to pick one specific artifact, it would be the Presidential Medal of Freedom that Ellington was awarded on the occasion of his 70th birthday at the White House by President Nixon, because I think that might have been the capstone of his career. The 10-block journey from his birthplace to the White House took him 70 years and 10 million miles of travels. His father had occasionally served as a butler at special events at the White House. Now, his father would have had to enter via the service entrance. His son, Duke Ellington, proudly walked through the front door.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. That's an amazing perspective on a piece of history. Thank you so much. Are we getting any other questions in the chat?
We received numerous short thoughts from the viewers, and they tuned in from numerous locations, from Montenegro and the regional countries to Germany and the United States. One comment stands out, referring to your talk: educational, informative, and entertaining. So I would like to ask a question, as we are all in this long time pandemic. I know you work at home, and I would like to ask you, what are your current projects?
Well, Maya, it's true that I still have an office at the museum as curator-emeritus, but I go there just periodically, and I do my professional work at home mostly, and that's two things: lecturing. These days during the pandemic, it's lecturing via Zoom to universities and private organizations around the country. And the other part of my work is writing. And these days I'm writing articles on music, about one article a month for the Wall Street Journal. What I like about that is that it feels to me like musical missionary work. The readers of the Wall Street Journal are mostly business people, investors, and they're not essentially music lovers. And a lot of them probably have never heard of Billie Holiday's incendiary song, Strange Fruit. They probably don't know the name Billy Strayhorn. So I feel like I'm expanding their awareness and their knowledge of this great music and these great African Americans and Americans. And by doing so, I hope I'm having even a little bit of influence on their values, that so they value the music and the people who created it. I like to say, if you love Black music, you have to love Black people. So that's how I'm spending my time.
Thank you.
If I may also tune in related to the comments that we received from viewers. I had a busy time answering the comments that were not questions, but that were praises. And the few could be also seen as comments like Louis Armstrong is the best, Dr. Hasse is amazing, and also La La Land is the best jazz movie, to which I would use as an introduction for my question, because we've been watching movies during Jazz Appreciation Month in all the past editions, and we always look for advice and inspiration when it comes to our resources. Are there any new works that came to your attention that you would recommend us to watch and subsequently screen in the next period?
You mean recent movies?
Yes.
Um,
Or just some of your favorites, all-time favorites.
well, the movie, sorry, oops. The movie Round Midnight, which is not a recent movie, is based on the life of the pianist Bud Powell, as well as Dexter Gordon, the saxophonist, set in Paris. That was just written up last week in a very well-written article, illuminating article in the New Yorker magazine as these, in that writer's view, the #1 jazz film. It's really hard for Hollywood to get jazz right. So there, in the number of movies on jazz, not that many really great ones. Now there's just been I think it's an 8-part or 10-part series on television in the United States on the National Geographic Channel about Aretha Franklin. Not jazz, but she was recording jazz for a few years. And it stars Cynthia Erivo, the British-born actress and singer, who also starred in the movie Harriet, about Harriet Tubman. And there's a lot of truth to this movie, this series. It's a series, you'd have to say it's a docudrama. And I don't know if you can get that in Montenegro, but I do recommend that. There are a lot of good documentaries, and there's a lot of good concert footage from the Newport Jazz Festival and others. And I'd be happy to exchange lists with you and see what you're showing, and maybe I can suggest some other titles.
Sure, and we'll be taking notes. A few questions arrived in the meantime since we asked for them. From the same person, we got 2 very interesting questions. Actually 3, but 2 are kind of similar or belong to one area. April King asked, which parts of the collection are the largest, are most popular, and closest to your heart?
That's the Duke Ellington collection. With 200,000 pages, it dwarfs any of our other music collections. 200,000 pages, half of that unpublished music. The other 100,000 pages, documents of various types, personnel records, salary records, correspondence, tour itineraries, things like that. That's just an enormous body of materials. And that's the collection that is most often used by researchers and students and scholars and teachers. And it's closest to my heart.
Wonderful. Thank you. And another question from the same person, actually. Do you have any thoughts or comments on the jazz scene in Europe and in Balkans?
Well, I wouldn't say that I'm an expert on the jazz scene in Europe, but there are hotbeds. Certainly, Vienna is a real hotbed of jazz. And I have to say Montenegro is too, because of the work of the Jazz Art Association and Maya, and the work that the American Embassy in Corner does to support her. When I was there 3 years ago, I had a chance to hear this wonderful group from Serbia, led by Jasna Jankovic, which just blew me away. And since that time, I've had an opportunity to meet Jasna again in Vienna. And she's just amazing, a musician and a composer and musical thinker. And that's the kind of big scope that I think Jazz Appreciation Month in Montenegro has had over the years. This year with the Balkan Youth Orchestra, I wish I could be there to hear it. I just think you're doing marvelous work. And again, my hat's off to you, Maya.
Thank you. I'm so happy that you discovered Jasna Jovicevic art here in Montenegro 3 years ago. And we are very happy to have many musicians from the Balkans all over those years. And this year we will also have musicians from this area. We had Albanian group playing here in Cultural Information Center. We will promote our new Montenegro trio with some guests. And also on the end of the April, we will promote Balkan Youth Jazz Orchestra. We work on almost a year, and we have support from Western Balkan funds for the project.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Another question I have is from Michael J. Gurrier. Ask Dr. Hasse to say something about James Reid's Europe. His band was the rage of the continent in the World War I.
Michael Goyer, Dr. Jazz of New Orleans. Hello.
Wow.
Michael used to have a terrific radio show in New Orleans, and now he has a terrific radio show in Richmond, Virginia. James Reid's Europe was raised in Washington, D.C. He was a neighbor of John Philip Sousa, America's greatest composer of marches. He went, Europe did, to New York City and became the musical director for Irene and Vernon Castle, a white couple who helped make ballroom dancing respectable. Before that, it was semi-respectable, but they made it respectable. And he was their musical director. And then in World War I, the Great War, he led an all-Black regiment in France. They were both war heroes in terms of fighting, and they played this new kind of proto-jazz, an early form of jazz, and the French went crazy for them. They gave concerts, and the French couldn't get enough of them. He came back to the United States at the end of the war, was honored with this huge parade down Fifth Avenue. This is almost unheard of. A Black American being honored in 1919 with this huge parade, ended up in Harlem. Then the band that he led went up to Boston, and unfortunately, the drummer in the band, who was, I think, deranged, killed him. And so Europe's career was cut short. It was a great shame. The things that he could have done had he lived are just beyond imagination.
I would like to really thank you for your time and for your great lecture and all details you share with us. It's always great to see you. I hope we will see in person one day after pandemic here in Montenegro.
I hope so too. It's been a great honor, and I thank you all for having me, and I thank all the people who watched. And please stay safe and happy Jazz Appreciation Month.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hasse.
Thank you on our behalf as well. Enjoy your evening.